Awesome. Well, thank you again, Paul, for making some time to speak with me today. It's been a pleasure working with you, of course, over the past few months here. And as I was saying before we started the recording, um, I've been bragging about the Employment Help Center and the work you're doing. So thank you for sharing, your success with us and for using InStage. But today is really all about you, Paul. And what I always like to start doing when we begin these episodes is to learn a bit more about your background and how you got to where you are today. So
Sure.
maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about your career journey and some of the stops you've made along the way to get to the position you're in today.
Sure. Yeah. First, thanks for the support of the Employment Help Center. We're a small but mighty team here in West Niagara. So thank you. Yeah, so my journey actually started in the insurance world. I started out, finished school, went into becoming an insurance broker, worked in the commercial sector for about 10 years. And decided I wasn't getting the fulfillment that I wanted out of life. Did some reflecting, and at that time, I was doing a lot of basketball coaching, um, running a not-for-profit basketball club, and I realized that helping others and helping them to achieve their goals was really what resonated with me and made me feel satisfied and fulfilled in what I was doing. So I was trying to find something that I could parlay into the same energy um, into a career. And one of the mothers of the girl that I coached was in the employment services industry. So she said, I think it would be a good fit for you. You've got the experience working with businesses and everything. So what I did is I went back to school for the social service worker program. Actually utilized at that time it was called Second Careers. It's known as Better Jobs Ontario now.
I've heard of that.
Okay, and so that helped to fund me to go back to school. And then through my co-op work, I did a couple of co-ops. One with uh, first with Community Living Burlington
Yeah.
in their employment services. And then my next one was with March of Dimes Canada in their employment services. Um, Upon graduating, I got a position with March of Dimes Canada, doing as an employment outreach specialist, and um, it was a contract position for a mat leave. So as that was coming to an end, I was starting to look for what would be my next what was going to be my next jump, and I landed at Employment Help Center.
Oh,
Um, and so from there, I was a job developer. We also, for a little while, I did a job developer slash employment advisor role. A few years down the road, I think it was maybe about 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, became the job development team lead. And from there, the opening came up for executive director, and I was I was a successful candidate. So that was in October of 2022. I came into the role as executive director here. So it's been, an interesting journey, but I think also one that demonstrates, when you have a plan and a goal and things align, you can make it happen, right?
well, that's just the thing I love hearing, especially at the start of these conversations, because everyone's got such a different story about how they've ended up in the role they have now. And I find it extremely encouraging to know you can switch directions, at any point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as your needs change, as your ambitions change, as your goals change. Um, and that's something I was wondering, just from what you've already told us here, had you gone to school early on for, insurance, brokering?
Yeah.
Like, was that something you okay, wow. And then,
Yeah.
after that, sort of realizing you want to go back to school, I find that extremely impressive. And as I say, encouraging, because I think a lot of people go to school and think they're going to do what they went to school for. And that's kind of the standard mentality. But,
Absolutely.
yeah, more often than not, I hear that people will try that thing and realize, somewhere along the way they want to do something different. So for you, was the pivotal moment talking to one of the mothers from the basketball team you were coaching that made you
It
want to?
was. It was. I really didn't know which way I wanted to go, right? And that summer I was coaching and taking kids, the team throughout the US. So we were traveling a lot. There was a lot of downtime to be able to, get to know parents and stuff because you're traveling and sitting poolside at the hotels or whatever.
Yeah,
And so yeah, it gave me it wasn't something that I really knew about. She said, you'd be a great job developer. What is that? Right? And why would I be a great job developer? And so, she looked at the transferable skills that I had, my business background, so and the insurance background specifically. I had an understanding of how businesses work, what they're looking for, what the labor market is like a little bit as well from working with them. So she saw that she knew I was a personable person, and had the sales background as well, which sometimes you've got to sell candidates in this industry if you're trying to place them into a job. And so yeah, she just saw it as a natural fit. Um, so yeah, and that's really, when you work with an Employment Ontario provider and one of our employment advisors, that's one of the things that they look at is, what are those transferable skills that you've got, or that you've gained throughout, whether it's, even if you don't have that work experience. I talk a lot of times to athletes about, they're worried that they've spent so much time in their career working on the athletic side of things that they don't have that work experience because they haven't been had the time to do it, right?
right.
But there's great things that you learn through sport and through activities, participation in other activities, whether it's your schoolwork or extracurriculars, um, that you gain experience, and that can be put on a resume. Employers do see that, right? But you've just got to know the right way to communicate that.
Well, I'm glad you spoke about that because I was going to ask, is there anything from the insurance world that you felt helped you, break into the employment help world? And, it's exactly what you're saying. But I do think that's what holds people back sometimes because it feels like, well, I've put all this time into getting good at selling insurance. I would have to start all over again to
Right.
move into another field. But to your point, uh, there are lessons learned and skills developed along the way that end up being useful in the next line of work you choose. And that's another thing I was wondering because I find these career transitions so interesting. In that transitionary period, Paul, where you went back to school, how did you find, how was that period of life like with balancing, some of the other, things you had to probably maintain while you were
Yeah.
making that transition? What was it like balancing where you were at in your life at that point?
Yeah, it's definitely probably one of the more busier times of my life there.
Fair.
Right. You've got to, I was working in a survival job to make ends meet, doing the work with the basketball club, and then the school work that comes along with it. Um, so yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. But you know that you put the work in, the rewards are going to come at the end of it, right? Just
Yeah.
like anything. You've got to be willing to put in the work. Um, I was, managing a, co- a commercial book of business for a broker, and now I'm, a co-op student,
Yeah.
doing whatever they want me to do.
Right.
And you've got to be willing to do that, right? You've got to be willing to put in the time. Um, and and learn from the bottom up, right? Otherwise, you're never going to really gain those skills and that solid understanding. And you're going to be just always looking for that next opportunity when that opportunity is really right in front of you if you're just willing to put in that work.
I think that's such a helpful practical tip. And I was just talking about this to someone yesterday who was asking about co-op positions kind of as a mid-career professional.
Hmm.
And, again, I really appreciate you telling the story because I do think co-op is such a great way to, build inroads.
It is.
And to kind of hear you put it that way, after having a career, to go back and be a student and use co-op as a way to gain experience. And, to your point, like through doing a ton of work. I just think it's practical. I think it's like an insightful way to explain how you can make that transition possible. So, thank you for sharing the insight on that. And the next kind of question it makes me think of, because I enjoy talking to people who have been part of career services, as it has changed, as
Yeah,
an
yeah.
industry. What kind of things have you noticed over the time that you've been in the field now? How has it changed since you got started with it?
Um, I think that it's changed in that we've had to adapt. We've had to adapt. COVID was a big, really, was a spark for that for sure,
Big
right?
time.
Um, as soon as we didn't have laptops when COVID hit, right? As an organization, we were still working off a desktop, computers,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden they've got to send staff to work from home. So, we're working on getting that technology. So I think one of the biggest changes that we saw out of that was the technology, like any other industry, right? But we continue
Definitely.
to be, but we never would have thought like we could do this work from home, right? and
Absolutely.
and we
Yeah.
are and we still do it now. One of the perks that we provide to staff is the ability to have some work from home days still, so
Yeah.
that because of the cost of gas went through the roof. We've got a lot of staff that do commute into work from 30-40 minute drives in. So yeah, we've used that as a perk, is they can still work from home. Now we've got all the technologies. We're accustomed to using Zoom like we are now, getting our phone systems onto the laptop so they can still access their phone systems. Yeah, so I think that some of the technologies have definitely changed, and we're starting to see the industry support those technologies as well. Heck, that's how we met. So
That's true. That's such a good point. And it is interesting, right? How something like that can really make it clear that another way is possible when it seemingly felt like, desktops were the only way and in person was the only way. So I try to keep that top of mind for myself now as well.
mhm,
Is there something different we could be doing that could be more helpful or more efficient? So it has changed, I think, a lot. It's changed every industry, of course,
it
that
has.
period of time there.
It has, but
Um,
yeah,
but that's good.
we can connect with more, right? With more people now. We would especially those, like, we're in an area in West Niagara that has zero public transportation. So, and we're working with a segment of the population that oftentimes relies on public transportation to get where they need to go. So we were often going to where the clients are at, right? Now we're able to connect um, in more ways. So
Yeah,
it's great, and see
that
more
is a
people
great
because
change.
we're not worrying about that travel time, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And a big reason we're doing this podcast is to raise awareness about these services. And so for those watching, maybe a helpful reminder to know you don't necessarily have to go into a center the way you might have thought. There are ways to do this remotely and get some of this guidance that you've already mentioned,
Mhm.
uh, at your own pace, without having to commute, without having to have that as a factor, or an obstacle to getting the help you need. So that's a great point, Paul. I'm glad you brought that up. Uh,
Absolutely.
in the same kind of vein of questioning, I'm wondering, in your opinion, what's the most common misconception about career services or
Mm.
employment services? Um, what comes to mind, as a
Yeah,
misconception potentially?
I think a misconception is that we're a placement agency, right? That you'll walk in the door, we're just going to send you to a job. We're really not. We're there to support you, and not just in your employment. We want to get you employment ready, and then support you throughout as well. So a lot of people that come through our doors, they're not actually ready for work. There's still a lot of that life stabilization that needs to take place. So we're there to be able to support them. We can, refer them to other services that are going to help them with, whether it's housing or food or clothing. We can make those referrals and those introductions for them, which are, it's tough sometimes to admit that you need that help, right?
Absolutely.
So just when somebody does walk through our doors, we know that they've taken a big step. And so we want to unpack, what is it that you really need from us in order to be successful when you are ready for employment.
Right.
Um, so I think that's one of the misconceptions is that, we're just all about employment. We're not. We're about preparing you to succeed and improve that quality of life. Um, and then we work with you once you do gain employment. In the new model, we stay in contact with you for a year beyond the time that you get that job. And we're following up with you, making sure that, there's something else. Is there anything else that you need? Are you still in that job? Can we support you? Even are there, a small financial assistance that you need? You haven't worked in 4 years and you're now standing on your feet 8 to 10 hours a day, and you're starting to get back pain. Well, is there something that we can do, right? Can we get you some better shoes? Can we get you a non like a anti-fatigue mat to stand on? Some of those supports from a financial aspect that will get you through that job and allow you to stay in that job and retain that job long term.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Paul, because that's an expectation I wouldn't have thought of, but it makes a lot of sense. I could see people thinking about employment services as, I'm gonna go there and they're gonna get me a job, and actually feel intimidated by that because they probably know at some level they're not ready, and so they would hesitate reaching out for help.
Yeah,
When really it's the perfect place to go because it's that full support system like you're talking about, from figuring out what that job might even be to all those auxiliary things that come from, being in a position where, yeah, maybe you haven't worked for 4 years and there are other pressing concerns.
yeah.
Uh, that you need to think about while figuring that out. So I'm really glad you framed it that way because that makes it feel a lot more like all you have to do is walk through the door and there's going to be people who can guide you from there. You don't have
That's
to
it.
have the rest of it figured out.
Absolutely. That's and again, we're not just going to we're not going to place you into a job. We're there to support you. And our hope is the next time that you need to go get a job, that you're self-sufficient and you can do that. You've got some insight on how to write that resume or and how to network and how to get, what are those options for job searching? What website should I go to? Should I be doing all of my job searching on Indeed? Um, you know, those types of questions, which you shouldn't be, by the way. But
Yeah.
so giving you that skill set to be able to job search self-sufficiently.
Absolutely. Um, and kind of on the other side of the coin here, something else I've been trying to explore through the conversations I've been having on the podcast are guidance for employment staff themselves.
Yeah,
With how drastically this field has changed and with the needs of so many job seekers changing as well and being a bit of a moving target sometimes, uh, my personal sort of realization is that this is a tough job, and one that's extremely important, extremely needed. But I'm curious your thoughts on are there ways to make sure that the people doing this work are also supported, don't feel burnt out, and can kind of get the support they need? Have you seen any kind of resources for the people facilitating this work,
yeah,
and things like
yeah.
that we can make them aware of?
Absolutely. There's and I think that the industry as a whole is recognizing that, especially the burnout piece, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be providing them with that work-life balance, right? Ensuring that the organization you're working for has a policy on disconnecting, um, ensuring that uh and asking as well for that help, right? We're so accustomed to giving that help all the time, but sometimes we forgot to ask for that help ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Our staff will oftentimes bring in, we ensure, it's the learning's continuous, right? The labor market's always changing. People are always changing. So our learning is always changing. So we're always going through training and whether that's, mental health, self-care, we did some mental health first aid training, trauma-informed care, we did last year as well. And all these things, while you may be learning about it for your clients, you need to be thinking about it from your own perspective and taking care of yourself first and foremost. if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. So take care of number one first, and you'll be successful. But recognize those signs of a burnout and understand it, and have those conversations. Right, we're a caring industry. It's at least it's on our front door. We're the Employment Help Center, so we're all willing to help. Everybody is, which is a great thing. And I do find that there's great, small communities, these uh, within the staff. They're very, very supportive of one another.
Yeah.
And love, that's I love watching having a new staff member come on and just the immediate, gratitude that they have towards the other staff because the other staff are just so willing to help.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've met your team and they're an amazing team. It's quite clear the kind of work-life balance and culture at the Employment Health Center and how supportive it is. And I do think it's a good reminder, especially for people who have this helpful nature about them, to remember that it's okay to ask for help yourself. And I always
Absolutely.
like to think of that, they tell it to you every time you're on an airplane, put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. And something about that's always stuck with me. It's somewhat counterintuitive, especially if you want to help, to kind of put your needs last, but you can only help so much if you do that. So I do think
Absolutely.
it's an important reminder.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And we try and remind staff of that as much as possible and throughout the industry. And yeah, and again, there's a lot of continuing education opportunities out there,
Yeah.
and free opportunities as well. So it's not going to cost you a lot, and I'm sure most employers are very willing to support their staffs in those undertakings.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like a great example yourself, right? Having started as a job developer, to where you are now, there's clearly room for growth and advancement, and
Oh
I
yeah,
think that's exciting within the industry here. Um, and kind of like one of the last questions I think we have time for today, Paul, before I know I'll have to
sure,
let you go,
sure.
um, is just sort of, do you have any thoughts on how the job market's going to change based on, again, all the things that have happened so quickly in these last few years? Do you see there being certain skills or certain jobs where there's going to be a lot of demand for those things? Does anything come to mind, kind of, what we expect to see in the future?
Yeah, I don't know if if it like it's not a big secret. I mean, we need the trades. And there's a big push for the trades. We're seeing a lot of immigration coming in, but what we're not seeing is the skill sets matching what the needs are of the employers. And so I think that we do need to look at that and provide those training opportunities in the community, and build that awareness of the trades. It's very lucrative. Probably if I could go back, 25 years, I would have been looking at the trades. A lot less debt coming out of school when
Yeah.
you go the apprenticeship or the trades route, oftentimes. And yeah, we're going to need it, right? We really are going to need it. And so we're currently doing a pre-apprenticeship training program. It's called a Try a Trade. It's a 3-week program where you can learn about the trades, do a little bit of pre-employment, work, learn those skills, and then we'll put you into an 8 to 12 week placement so that you can understand, a little bit more about that trade, and is that something that you would want to build a career in? So it's all about career discovery with a focus on the trades, really. And there's a lot of those programs out there, the pre-apprenticeship programs, training programs. I encourage people to look at them, because there's going to be a huge need for the trades. The pay is good. It's a lot of hard work at first, but anything that involves hard work usually rewards you pretty well in the future. So
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's such a great point to look out for. A lot of people touch on AI, um, and I think, yeah, we're missing that other side of things that's already got a huge demand and is only going to increase. And one thing you made me think of as we talk about the trades is that because that's really a teamwork oriented sort of field,
yes,
for the most part. I think a lot of people are actually looking for that in work right now. I hear it over and over again that working from home is great, but people miss that camaraderie.
Yeah.
And I've worked in the trades myself when I went through, my time in university, and the group of people that come together to do that type of work, you'll never forget them. So it's something
No.
definitely I think worth looking out for. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's an industry that's diversifying all the time.
Yeah.
There's lots of options out there in terms of what trade you want to enter, but it's in need, and I always encourage people to do it. The old way of finishing high school and going off to college or university, and then trying to find yourself from there. Um, it works for a lot for some. But I think I really encourage people to look at a trade avenue. I know a lot of friends that went that route from high school and were quite successful. Right?
Yeah.
They were in their bank accounts were in the black when mine were all in the red.
I know
And
what you mean.
so it's I highly encourage it, and it can be very rewarding. It can be hard on the body sometimes, but there's options in the industry to grow from there. So.
Absolutely. And some of the I have similar friends and they've gone on to start their own companies. So it's like any
Exactly.
other of these directions. There's so much room to branch off and grow. Um, and yeah, I think it ties really nicely into the start of your story, Paul. You start with something and you just kind of keep checking in on yourself about what it is you need to kind of live the life you want. So thank you
Absolutely.
again.
There's no straight line, right? There's no straight
Oh,
line. It's a very squiggly line with a lot of reversal.
yeah,
And we know that people generally we see people go through 3 to 5 different like careers, not just jobs, but careers
right.
in their lifetime. And so we can't be afraid of it. We can't be afraid of change. We can't be afraid of change is what I would put out there. It is scary, but we can't be afraid of it. And put in the hard work and get over that, and you'll be happy you did.
Uh, I think that's a great note to end it on, Paul. I know I got to let you go. So thank you
Sure.
again so much for the time today. And maybe just if you have 2 more seconds to tell us how to learn more about the Employment Help Center, if you're in the Niagara area or somewhere close by, what's the best way for people to kind of take advantage of the support there?
Yeah, absolutely. Check us out on our website, employmenthelp.org. You can, email us info@employmenthelp.org for more information, or give us a call, 905-563-WORK, and we'll take care of you.
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you again, Paul. Really great getting to hear your story today, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future.
Anytime. Thanks for the opportunity, Imran.
Thank you. Have a great
All
rest
right.
of your day.
You too.
Bye.